Awesome. Well, it looks like we have a good amount of folks dialed in. While everyone's trickling in, we can just start with some housekeeping items before I kick it over to Renee. Hi, everybody. You've probably heard me on webinars or trainings before, but my name's Caroline. I sit on the Educate team here at Ceros. So really just here to kind of kick things off before passing it over to Renee. Before I hand the reins to her, I just wanted to let everyone know you have the option to participate and ask questions throughout today's webinar. So please feel free to send in questions through the Q&A or send in chats in the chat window. We'll keep an eye on both of those. Also, we're going to be following up with the recording of this session. So if you are interested in referring back to it for anything, you'll always have access to that as well. But with all that being said, Renee, I can pass things over to you.
Great. All right. Well, thanks, Caroline. And well, as all of you now know, my name is Renee, and I'm head of Customer Success Enablement at Ceros. And my role is to develop training and collateral for onboarding and ongoing training of our customer success team, as well as partnering with others like Caroline here in Educate to develop more customer-facing enablement materials like this, but ultimately just to help our customers better drive adoption. So with that, we'll go ahead and dive into the presentation. So the goal really for today's session is really just to help bring to light some of the many different ways that you can integrate interactive content, as well as to help you prioritize where it might make most sense to get started based on your goals. And in this session, we are going to focus more on bottom of the funnel, so types of content that's more helpful for sales as well as customer success teams. But in a previous session, we did focus more on the top, which you can always access as well on our Educate site. So to get things started, the decision to start creating interactive content, it really is an exciting point in time for any company. It's really an opportunity for you to push your creative boundaries and use that creativity to help move your business and company forward. At the same time, though, we recognize, especially for those who are doing this for the first time, it can be a little bit overwhelming in determining what opportunities for interactive are the right ones to get started with and which ones will have the most impact. So to help to kind of clarify these points, you can start this exploration in one of two ways. So first, really looking at your customer's journey. So starting to explore what are all the different touch points your customer goes through, from learning about your offerings to becoming a customer and advocate, and really thinking through how interactive content can be used to make that experience better or maybe even faster. You can likewise look inwards into your own organization and start to understand what are the different teams and departments in your company spending most of their time and energies on, and then thinking through, well, how can you start to use interactive content to maybe make them a little bit more efficient or promote their activities in a more effective way. So the net result of this will hopefully be a rough map of main areas of opportunity, which you can start to align content types to. So for example, if you realize that maybe you're struggling with just people learning about your company and really discovering you, it might make sense for you to perhaps, partner with your PR team to create social media or branded content campaigns. Or if you learn that your sales team is struggling with converting those leads into customers, having them take that next step, then you can partner to create things like interactive case studies. But as I said, we're going to focus on those bottom two use cases that are more within sales and customer success. And as we see here, there are a lot of different types of content and use cases that kind of fit within those main goals of better supporting those teams. These ones that I've chosen here, they really are just the tip of the iceberg of what you can do. And we really have chosen these just based on what is most popular with our customers, as well as what we see to be most effective. So I'm going to go ahead and dive into some of my favorites, but I'm hoping that the team can put into the chat just maybe things that they're interested in learning about or what they're working on, and we can dive into those as well. So I will kick things off with diving into RFPs and sales decks. So RFPs and sales decks, RFP being request for proposal, those are one of the top use cases that we see within the sales enablement realm, as they go a long way in helping companies and brands to stand apart from their competitors, whether it's an in-person pitch or one that is delivered through a screen share. And not only are they more visually engaging, but they have the added benefit of being more flexible, allowing sales teams to jump around and tailor their pitch and flow to match their prospects' interests. So one of my favorite examples comes from a customer who has been with us since 2017. And they are a large design and manufacturing company. And just due to the nature of their business, the contract engagements that they bid on are well within the 6 to 7 figure range. So they had a goal to increase their contract win rates, and they felt like one of the ways they could achieve that was through improving their overall sales experience, and specifically the types of assets and collateral that they were sharing within it, which ultimately led them to Ceros. So with their sales and design team working together, they were able to really reimagine their static and very lengthy PDF pitches into an interactive asset, which we see a representation of here. So bringing in things like interactive floor plans, schedules, photo galleries, and more, and keeping the more numbers and pricing materials accessible through a PDF download. And while they were initially presenting these pitches in person, they have really translated nicely to digital, which was a bonus when COVID came about this past year. And as for the initial goal to improve their win rates, they have seen a lot of success. They actually let us know that they've seen about a 10% increase in their close rates just by having this just better user experience. And while the initial time investment to create these pitches was a bit more upfront, they have been able to build a lot of efficiencies over the years through building out their own templates and leveraging Inspire as well.
Yeah, and just to kind of touch on what Renee just mentioned with templates, you'll see we have this really great template on our Ceros Inspire that you can leverage if for RFPs and things like that, whether you're just looking for inspiration on kind of how to format yours, or you're looking for an RFP template to work off of. These are a really great starting point, these different templates that we have on our site. It's really easy in our Ceros templates to swap out images and text and really customize that to make it your own. So don't hesitate to lean on those templates for anything that you need moving forward.
Great. So I'm going to next dive into case studies. I always see this being a popular one with our customers. And this is definitely a lower lift use case as compared to the sales decks, but they really are just as valuable within the sales process, as they do provide much needed social proof and affirmation as prospects are evaluating what solution or partner to work with. So the story that I wanted to highlight here comes from a leading national construction company, and they've also been a customer since 2017. So the projects that they bid on are also very large scale, and as a result, their sales process is very slow. So their corporate marketing team felt like if they were able to keep prospects more engaged throughout that entire process, they would potentially be able to maybe decrease the length of their sales cycle, as well as just improve their win rates. And they felt like interactive content, particularly case studies, could be an easy and scalable solution. So these case studies, like what we see here, they bring in just subtle animations, video, and more to better convey just their expertise and prior successes. And as they are digital, they are fully trackable to allow their team to see how their prospects are engaging with the content throughout the entire bid process. So they have found that these case studies have worked well for their teams and goals. And they actually ended up turning this first one that we see here into a template, which they've reskinned to 5 different case studies this past year alone.
Yeah, and what's really cool with those templates too is not only do we have the templates on our Ceros Inspire, like the one Renee is showing now, but like she was just showing in that previous example, it's also fairly straightforward to create your own templates in Ceros. So if you do build something that you like a case study, something that's easily repeatable and something you'll probably want to replicate in the future, rather than ever having to build that out multiple times, you can just duplicate that and then swap out your own content. So it's a really good way to keep your content very streamlined and consistent across the board. So all of your case studies have the same formatting, the same animations and things like that. So that way, creating your own templates will solve for any sort of inconsistencies there. And then on top of that, like Renee is showing right now, we have that case study on template on Ceros Inspire. And what I also like to point out with those is it's possible to grab just little different modules. So if you see that kind of hover state section there where you roll over these different tiles to reveal more info, if you just liked that, you could copy that section, paste it into another piece you're working on, and swap out just that text. But it carries over the interactions and animations. So if you do like things that you see in those templates, just know you don't have to use the full thing. You can kind of take bits and pieces from those and use them however you need.
Great. Thanks, Caroline. So I know those were the two that I want to just start off with. So I guess if we want to check the chat and see if anyone put any suggestions that they would like to see, because I know we'll go through about two more.
Yeah, so none came through the chat. I'm looking in the Q&A though, and one did come through for QBRs. And then there is another request for customer education, which I, of course, would love to dive into too, since I sit on the educate side of things. So does that sound good, Renee?
Perfect.
If we go through those two?
Let's do that. And that's funny. QBRs are definitely right up my wheelhouse as well. So we'll move into more of the land of customer success. And so the thing with QBRs is that, and customer success in general is it's generally about, building relationships with customers, but it's even more so about building value. So we do find that interactive content, it can be a great medium to showcase, things like ROI, relationship wins, and recommendations, especially for high touch and enterprise types of engagements. So the example that we have showcased here, this is from a customer who is a large media and entertainment conglomerate, and they've been with us since 2018. So one of their biggest revenue generating teams focuses on selling and executing on ad campaigns and sponsorships, whether they're for TV, branded content, events, or more. And traditionally, when campaigns were completed, they would deliver a PDF or PowerPoint deck to recap key metrics such as impressions, views, engagement, and more. However, their VP felt like this experience was really disappointing when they compared it to the really highly polished and produced campaigns that they had just wrapped. So they felt like if they could improve this, it would not only just impress their client, but would also encourage repeat business just through having this superior customer experience and really going that extra step at the end. So using Ceros, they started to create interactive campaign recaps like this, which allowed them to bring data to life and showcase the actual media and digital clips that were associated with the campaign. So these interactive recaps are now part of their standard offering, as the customer reception has been, very positive, and they have definitely helped to spark further sales and campaign engagements, and really, again, help them fulfill that initial goal of retaining and generating more business. And I know that this example is from a media company, but I did want to just add in too that, our own team, has actually started kind of taking a cue from our own customer with doing similar types of things for our customers as well.
That's great. And Renee, if you don't mind, someone also just sent in another question that actually was asking, what is a QBR? So do you mind just diving into that a little bit?
Yes, that's a very good question. And I know sometimes I do need to be mindful with all of these acronyms. It can be a little difficult. So QBR stands for quarterly business review. And this is something that typically it's most typical for like tech companies or SaaS companies, but to just do a quarterly review of how the engagement is going. So through the context of, I guess, Ceros with our own customers, customer success managers will recap with our clients every 3 months, talking through, well, how is the relationship going? Are you seeing value in our platform? We'll also present kind of key metrics showing So again, in the context of Ceros, highlighting, well, this is how much, content you've published in the last few months. Here's how much time you're spending in the studio to show that you're on track with getting value, as well as giving other recommendations for what to do in the future. So, so a lot of times, again, through the lens of Ceros, we'll go through, maybe new features that we've released that you should be taking advantage of, or new use cases to show. But yeah, it really is like a relationship recap. So thank you for asking that. And sorry, yes, for the acronyms. So hopefully that was helpful.
Perfect. Yeah, I think that was a great overview. And one other thing with the example you have showing here, one thing I know we've been talking a lot about is, working with your own templates or creating templates. So you can see here what we would recommend doing is you can actually put tips and tricks outside of the canvas as little text boxes floating around in Experience if you're a designer planning to create a template for your team to work off of. So this is something we do on my team, and I can talk about this also in the customer education portion, but something we'll do on my team is if a designer on our team is building something that us other folks with less of a design background are going to go into, potentially swap out images or text, they'll leave little hints around the outside of the canvas saying, hey, for this part, it's really easy if you right click and say replace image and do things like that. So great option if you are planning to create your own templates. So we wanted to include that little video there so you guys can see that as a suggestion as well.
Definitely. Yeah. And I will, I guess, mention on top of this is that we are looking, for some longer term product updates for versions that will be more, I guess, in line for non-designers for editing. So we can also include a link to that early access testing that we're starting for anyone who might be interested or who would have, cases where sales teams and customer success teams will be, be the primary editors of content. So we will wrap things up to dive into customer education. I know, Caroline, you are excited about this one. So once prospects have become customers, these educational materials can be created just to help get them ramped up and engaged and more quickly seeing the benefits of partnering with your team or using your products. And as interactive does allow you to integrate multimedia content like videos, like what we see in here, you really can provide a personalized feel, but one that is delivered to your audience in mass. So the example that we've included here is within a customer who sits within the B2B cybersecurity space, and they are a fairly recent customer signing on in 2020. So they had traditionally relied on in-person events and meetings to engage with their customers, both within the sales and post-sales process. However, with COVID-19, they were no longer able to do so and their teams were struggling. They also found that, a lot of their larger competitors were able to make that pivot to digital, but as they had no development resources themselves, they were not able to do so easily, which really led them to Ceros. So while they were ultimately looking to explore a variety of use cases, they initially started with addressing one of their main challenges, how to engage and educate their customers in a virtual world. So they actually partnered with our team in this case, and we created this interactive guide that allows users to explore video and other clickable elements to learn. And they have seen great engagement from this experience with over actually 75% of users watching the videos included. And they also took an extra step in including a content gate so people would have to fill out a form before entering this experience, which has allowed them to capture user information on who's viewing these materials so they could have continued follow-up throughout their onboarding journey.
Great. And yeah, if I could just chime into this one as well, wanted to point out here, we have a couple examples of how our team leverages Ceros for customer education. It's a little inception-y because we are using Ceros to teach people about Ceros. But one example here that you're seeing a video of right now is our accessibility best practices guide. So we've created things like interactive kind of ebooks and guides that anyone can use to jump in to learn more about whatever it is they're interested in. So the cool thing with this guide is it has that dynamic navigation section where you can just click through and really easily get to the section that you're interested in learning more about. So we always create best practices guides and ebooks and things of that nature for customer education, as well as, if you can see in the smaller little GIF on the right, we will create interactive modules using Ceros that we embed within blog posts and articles and things like that, just to further demonstrate points that we're making. So although this is a little bit different because you guys wouldn't be teaching people how to use Ceros, you can still create these interactive animated modules that maybe you embed in on a page on your site or something like that, just to help further explain whatever point you're making in a visual way, because people learn in all different types of ways. So it's nice to have a visual aspect there as well, so that people who are more visual learners can better interpret whatever it is that you're teaching them.
Perfect. So to hold time at the end for Q&A, I'll just dive quickly into a wrap up, and then we'll get to some of these questions. So, so there are a few parting thoughts that we did want to leave everyone with. And the first really big one is always, no matter what, to start with what are your goals. So being very deliberate upfront with what are you trying to solve for, and then designing the best content solution to solve that, rather than starting with, I want to create a case study or, this type of content, starting again with, what is the issue and how do you best solve that? The second one is to consider your resources and be realistic about what you're working with. So thinking about, well, what is the actual timeline that you're given within, to get a certain project done, and figuring out, what is the best, again, form that you should take to meet that, as well as also being realistic with, who will then ultimately be using this experience as well. So again, if we're looking at some of the things like, the sales decks or the recaps, these are things that are designed ultimately for customer success managers or sales reps to be updating. So you want to take that into consideration to make things simple enough and clear enough for them to be able to make these updates in the long run, rather than leaning on your design team. And the last point is always just to think long-term, especially for those who are, using interactive for the first time. You can start off simply, and map out what are those incremental steps and milestones that you need to take to start to develop, more complex types of experiences. So I think those are really, the parting thoughts that we do want to leave everyone with. But like I said, we do have time for questions.
Perfect. So Renee, there are a couple of questions that came through the chat that I definitely think we have some time to answer. One question that came through is, could we cover any tips and important things to know when creating sales decks? I have a couple of thoughts here, but I know you have more experience in sales decks than I do, so I'll let you tackle it first, and then if there's anything else, I can add to it.
Okay, so the tips for the sales decks. So I think the first thing that I would think about is whether or not to do, what type of sales deck, or better to mean is it, we have seen customers who have done their entire sales deck in Ceros. So it's a very large, complex experience. There's a lot of bespoke content that we might see. So if we go back to that example of, from the design and manufacturing company, you saw that they had full on project timelines and things like that. While it was a very beautiful and impactful experience, it was quite large and it was more an advanced experience. We've seen other clients take a more scaled back approach where they make kind of like a sales deck teaser. So having more evergreen content where maybe it's more about, your company, your values, your broad offerings, maybe highlighting a few key team members. And then that's the teaser that then you would use a more traditional format for that more bespoke type of content that takes, longer to build out. So I think that would be my advice is that, again, depending on resources as well as timelines, figure out, do you want to go the full blown approach or start off with that smaller approach as well? If that kind of helps, I think that would be my main advice. So Carolyn, if you want to turn in too.
Yeah, no, I think that was really helpful. And one thing I will say also that I've seen a lot of people do when creating sales decks in Ceros, and I know our Ceros sales team does it because their sales deck is in Ceros as well, is making sure you incorporate some sort of nav across all of your pages. Where the cool thing with Ceros is it doesn't have to be linear. Whereas if you were creating your sales deck in PowerPoint, you have to go kind of from page 1 to page 2 to page 3. If you want to go back a couple pages, you have to exit out of the presentation and kind of scroll up and then represent. The cool thing with the sales decks and Ceros is you could create some sort of nav that you create across all of your pages that then if you're on page 10 and whoever you're presenting to says, okay, I forgot what was on page 2, can you jump back? You can just click on the nav and jump back to whatever page you're interested in. So it's a little bit more dynamic and you can kind of tailor the conversation to what you guys are actually talking about and what they're interested in, and you'll be able to kind of jump from thing to thing that way. So that's something I think is really helpful in sales decks as well.
Definitely.
Yeah, and then tailoring onto that, I saw another question that came through the Q&A says, our salespeople have customized decks that they just need to change names on, et cetera. Is there an easy way to let salespeople make changes? So not sure if they've ever been in the Ceros studio, but what they could do is just jump into the experience and make those simple text edits. And then a couple recommendations. We did do a webinar a little while back on creating templates for your own team. So we can also send that recording because there are some helpful tips in there. But some things I would recommend is locking any layers you don't want them to accidentally edit. So if there is a hotspot over a text box, maybe locking that hotspot so that they don't accidentally move it or change anything around that way. So that way they can just edit the text if only the text is unlocked. Additionally, you can, again, like we were saying before, put little tips and tricks outside of the canvas that says, edit this text box here, edit this text box here. So that way they know exactly what it is they need to be editing. And something I've also seen people do when creating content for folks on their team to be editing is using some sort of naming convention in your layers panel that says, whether it's in all caps, like change me or things like that. So people diving in can look in the layers panel and see, okay, this is something that needs to be changed. This thing says do not edit, so I know what not to change. So even just simple things like that can be helpful in that situation.
Yep, agreed. And we actually do something similar with our sales team where they update decks, and personalize, very simple things like that. We also had the sales team go through a certification to change it out. So they had to practice, update it, send it back, to their enablement, lead, just to show that they've done it correctly before they won the right to actually, change these out consistently themselves and send them out. Just because we know that sometimes, you want to be sure that, around brand consistency and that, things look good. So that would be another, piece of advice to kind of have that training session on that end. And then, reminding everyone again, like I mentioned, we are looking at adding the ability to have, some kind of interface for non-designers to be able to more easily edit Ceros. We're recruiting for early access testing now, so you can always visit our product hub. We'll share again the link later where you can sign up to learn more about that.
Perfect. And I feel like we might have kind of already answered this through answering the other questions, but want to make sure we're getting all of these. So just going to read out another one that came through. It says, we really like the idea of using Ceros for sales decks, but our team is new to interactive and it seems like a higher lift use case. What approach would you recommend, Renee?
Yeah, so I think that is, very much off the back of the first question, some of the advice I gave. And that would be to, again, figure out, but do you want to start off with a simpler experience of more of that evergreen content or go fully bespoke? That would be my advice. And then as well as looking at those templates that we have available in Inspire and seeing if those would fit what you have. You definitely want to make sure it will be dependent on the content you're working off to start. You don't want to kind of shove your content into a template that we have available, but if there is good overlap, which we do design them to have overlap with real world scenarios, definitely take advantage of that, even if it's small modules you're pulling from the template.
Definitely. And since we have some time, I think we definitely have some time to dive into this one too. Someone was asking if there was a chance we could go back and take a look at the product demo example since we still have some time.
Mm-hmm. So let me go.
And I know a question that came through before was just about if we don't get to all of these. So just so everyone knows, we'll be sending this deck out. So we'll take a look at the product demo one. But if there were any of these examples that we don't get through, just know you can jump in here, kind of navigate through this on your own and unpack any of these that way as well.
Yep. Yeah. So here is the product demo example. So the product demos that we see customers do, they do things like, stitching together different overlays or video captures as well to create more kind of self-serve demos that you can walk through. And again, similar to like the sales decks, having flexible navigation so people can jump around to the different features that they would want to see. So this particular example that we see here, this is from a customer who is in the B2B security space. They've actually been a customer for a few years, but they had an initial need where they wanted to improve their sales cycle and be more efficient. And they felt like they could be more efficient if they were able to kind of create these self-guided tours for prospects to walk through on their own time before meeting with the salesperson, so they could actually go into those sales meetings with more understanding of what the product did, and they could kind of have these more tailored discussions. So they actually created, in Ceros, I will say this was a large experience that they put together. It is very in detail, but again, you can see here that you're able to kind of walk through the different areas of the product that you're interested in. You get these more contextual tips as well. And they also then ultimately had, a form filled that then, they could fill out once they were interested in setting up that call with the sales team. I know for them in particular, this was very successful. And it actually did help them generate quite a few leads, and actually close quite a few customers. So you can see that they actually had taken the first one for their one product and ended up reskinning it for an additional product.
That's awesome. Love that example.
Yes.
Great. I mean, I think that looks like, unless anyone is still typing in a question, we can give it another couple of seconds, but that looks like all the questions that came through the Q&A, as well as all the questions that came through the chat. So thank you guys all so much for sending in questions and for joining us today. We always have a lot of fun on these, so we hope that you guys find them interesting and helpful. So just know you guys can always reach out with any other questions that come up, but we'll be following up with the recording of this, some other links that we mentioned, as well as this deck. So you guys can always refer back to any of these other examples at a later date. But thank you all so much for joining, and we hope to see you guys soon. Thanks, Renee.
Bye.
Bye, everyone.